The favorite of so many continues, the F-4 Phantom extra large version from Skymaster. Welcome to video number 3. We are continuing on with the back end of this aircraft, and we're going to keep going with the tail hook. So let's get back to it. Last video we finished off with the mounting of our tail hook and our back end. Our back end is essentially complete with the exception of that tail hook. So we've got lots of room in this area to mount our servo for the tail hook. The panel you can see right at the end of my finger, that is the back side of the tail hook. So that's where our servo is going to push through and operate the tail hook. Now there's a couple considerations when you're mounting something like a tail hook. All right, so first consideration with the tail hook is geometry. So if the servo is sitting in the plane and this piece represents our tail hook, when the tail hook is up, you want to have the servo not under force. So in our case, something like this, you want to have it so the arm is in line with the tail hook. When this operates, the servo is going to go like this. That's going to extend the servo, and that will push the tail hook down. So when the tail hook's down, the servo is holding the load of the tail hook, and then when the servo comes up like this, lifts the tail hook, and everything goes back in line like that. So this stuff's just a representation, but you want to keep these things in mind when you're setting something like this up. Now if you don't, if you just operate it like this, so let's say the tail hook's down like this, and when it's up, it's like this. That servo is going to always be under load when it is holding that tail hook up. So as soon as you turn the plane off, depending on the weight of this piece, your servo could always drop, your tail hook could always drop. You turn the plane back on, it snaps, it snaps. Not a good situation. Also more likely to burn whatever servo you're using out. All right, so here's some of the parts that we're going to be using for our tail hook. First of all, we're going to be using an MKS HV69 servo. Great servo for an application like this. Also good for gear doors. Fairly affordable servo, lots of power, and metal output shaft, the standard 6mm Futaba spline output shaft. So great option for this. We're going to be using a Seacraft aluminum arm. The aluminum arm is important because we're going to be putting a ball joint on this side. And if you're using the clevis, you could be using the plastic arm, but because we're using a ball joint, we need the stiffness of the aluminum arm. And then we're using a micro wood servo mount. Now this comes from our website. So we've got the micro, the mini, and the standard servo mounts on our website. And these things are awesome. They come with multiple back plates, different support types, different triangle pieces. It's an awesome setup for what this is. So anyways, you can check those out on our website. So I'm going to get this assembled. We're going to get the geometry figured out here. Essentially what's going to happen is we're probably going to mount the servo on the base of the fuselage. So it's going to be mounted like that. And we're going to have the arm operating like this. And that arm's going to move towards the tail hook in that direction. All right, so initially I was going to put the servo on the base of the fuselage, and I've decided to instead put it on the sidewall. Now a couple reasons for that. Number one, it lifts the arm up so it's more in line, so we'll probably get a straighter shot at the tail hook. And the other thing is if we put it in the base and you ever have to change that servo, getting at those screws is going to be an absolute nightmare. If we put it vertical in line with the vertical stab, then if we ever have to change those servos, it's going to be a lot easier. So that part's done. And now we've got the fuselage sitting on its end. We've got some exercise balls, adding some weight just to keep it in place. And we're going to now put a hole in this area. And that hole is going to be our access to have all the linkage and everything come through to the tail hook itself. So initially I'm just going to do kind of a square shape, and then we'll just adjust it as needed. You'll never see that because when this plane is putting its tail hook down, the most it's ever really going to come down is probably something like that. So whatever we do underneath here is essentially going to be invisible. All right guys, and it has been a minute since we've had a tip time. So this tip time has been brought to you by Trusty bent screwdriver. All right, so in a situation like this, I do my slice here to put my carbon horn inside the operational tail hook, and there's nothing in here. It's completely hollow. So what do? Well, the easiest way to install backing is you take a piece of foam. This is just like, you know, standard white, yellow, blue foam, and you can jam this into very tight areas, and of course when it gets in there, it expands, and what it does is it creates backing for you. So ideally, if we didn't put this backing in, what would happen would be that we would only get contact with our horn at the skin right here, which isn't ideal. We want to have some more structure in the back there. Not that this is a huge critical surface, but we want to make sure it's nice and solid and that horn's not going to push out. So we jam our foam in there, it gets in there and it expands and basically gives us something to put our glue against. There we go. So I'll show you inside here. So now when you look inside, we've got foam that we can manipulate, move around, drop down a little bit, and if we take our horn and put it in there, it is no longer just going to drop in and disappear. It has backing for the high saw. So we got our carbon arm mounted, and what I did here was just filled the hole with some high saw and using trusty bent screwdriver. Jammed the carbon arm in there. We sanded the carbon arm, added a couple holes to it, put it in there, and then one side just tacked it with some CA, some thick CA, and then filled around the carbon arm. So now that is done. We're going to let that cure. It closes with the existing hole. We may have to open that hole a little bit, but that's fine. And so we're going to leave that be. Now I don't want to get this glued in until we have our linkage and everything set up. So what I want to do here is I want to get our linkage done on this side, our rod set up, our rod attached to this side. We can close the tail hook and we can have this sitting in the closed position. So what that's going to do is make sure that the servo gets positioned in the correct position from the beginning, and then we'll use our servo travel to adjust the down position. But that's going to be the simplest way to get this thing set up. All right, so we've moved the tail section over to our other bench. We've got our servo arm taped in place just to make sure we're at a good angle that we're happy with. So we can't touch that until the high saw cures till tomorrow, so we'll set that aside. Now we've got the front part of our fuselage over here on our stand. We're going to take that, get it onto the workbench, and we are going to start with our tanks. Now the reason we're moving to the tanks is because if you have watched some of the previous videos of this series, the aftermarket tank that we're putting in here is by CM Jets, and it's a way bigger tank than the stock tank, and we've got to do some re-engineering on the mounts and everything. So that's why we're moving on to the tank setup, because we need to have the tanks installed before we start running other stuff. So we had two bolts holding the fuselage pieces together, so I've undone those bolts, and now we will take our fuselage front and mid pieces and separate them. So now we have full access to the mid part of the fuselage, and we can start working on the tanks. So we have covered this in previous videos on this series, but there's an example of the two different tanks. So stock tank, CM Jets tank, and the length is substantially different as well too. So I would suspect this is probably a 3, maybe a 4 liter tank, something like that, and this is 7 liters. So big difference. Obviously the fit is very different. So the stock tank, you've got a tab here at the rear and a tab with a bolt on the front. So you can see there, we've got that piece, we've got our interlock there. So we'll be able to reuse this back tab. We can cut that off of this tank and glue it onto this tank. But the aftermarket tank is substantially different. So It's quite a bit longer. We're going to have to come up with a different mounting tab system, probably on the front here, on each side kind of thing, something like that. But we need to get this fit before we can fit our side tanks. So the plan is we're going to use this for fuel. We're going to use the side tank for fuel, one of them, and we're going to use the other side tank for smoke. So that'll give us about 9.5 liters of fuel. We're going to, as a fill-up pattern, we're going to fill up our UATs, fill up this tank. This tank is going to come to the saddle tank's going to the vent. So it'll pull fuel from the saddle first and then the primary fuel tank. That'll be the pattern for fuel on this aircraft. So first step here, we need to get this brace out. I don't think we're going to reuse it, so we don't need to make it savable. What I'm more concerned with is getting this brace out and then just getting rid of the glue on the fuselage. That won't be a problem though. All right, so we want to get our tab off here, which we've done. Buddy, you're in the way of all the people. They're trying to watch. Oh, it's nighttime, so it's Nez's comfy time. Best way I've found to do that is with an oscillating tool. This is Milwaukee with a wood bit on there, and works great. Very efficient and nice way to get that off. So we've got the tab off. Now we need to get that out of the fuselage. And then what we can do as a first step is we can get this piece installed in the fuselage, and we'll get the tank glued to this. So at least that can cure overnight as well. All right, well, we got the brace taken out, and we were kind of working on fitting the tanks, and our glue joint inspector was inspecting the glue joints, and looks like she got bored and fell asleep. All right, so I did not get the back plate tab thing here glued on yesterday. Reason for that is I wanted to come up with a plan for the saddle tanks first. Now, initially what I thought about was cutting off this portion of the saddle tank, relocating it. But what I've kind of found out is that even if we go all the way up with those saddles, I don't think we have enough room to make that all work. So, because the stock location is, I'll put this in, is there, and we need that tank to be lifted up more than the space that we have there. So, different solution that I think is going to work awesome. So we're going to take this to our bandsaw, and we're going to cut off a section of this tank. So about that much of the tank, all the way down in a sliver. We're going to do that to both sides. Then what we'll do to fill this in, we will take some G10 and we're going to high saw that onto the side of the tank. So we won't cut this until we get our tank fit and shaped and everything properly first. But we're going to have a nice flat edge on those tanks. So essentially, when the primary tank is installed like this and we're even on both sides, the sides of the saddle will set at a nice angle like this and have zero interference. I think that's overall the easiest solution. It's going to be probably I don't know if it's easier to move the mounts, but I know it's going to work if we do the cut, because I know we don't have enough space to do this. And the reason I can say that confidently is if I put this center tank in the right position, pop that saddle in, even just to make that fit without any interference, it's got to sit on top of the center tank like that. And you can see there we've got about 1/2 inch sticking past. So I believe our only solution is to slice these primary saddle tanks. All right, and thank goodness for nice tools in the shop. The bandsaw with the adjustable tray there allowed me to make a 45-degree angle cut on my tanks. That is so nice to be able to use that. And you can see here we basically got everything fit. Now we do have to take more of these tanks off because we need some space to put our G10 material, but at least at this point now we're good. We've got a plan in place. So now what I'll do is I'm going to take these tanks to our sanding belt and we'll get them sanded down a little bit more, take another 1/8 to 1/4 inch off each tank, and that'll allow us a perfect fit with our entire system. All right, so we cut off another 1/4 inch off the tanks, and now we're perfect. So we got a decent amount of space on both sides, and I think that's going to work out beautifully. Nez is checking things out here, making sure we're all good. Yes, so perfect. I'm happy with that. That's great. Now we need to figure out how we're going to get our plates installed on the tanks. All right, so we got our 2 G10 plates done up here, and these are basically too big for these tanks, so we're going to get those high solid in place. We will tape them down, let them cure till tomorrow, and then what we'll do is we're going to sand these guys out, so it'll be a nice shape that matches the tank. So that should all work out perfect. And while we're here doing gluing, we're also going to get our bungs set up, our vent lines set up on both of these tanks as well, so we can get all of that glued in at one time. All right, tanks. So we have our tanks sorted out now. I've marked them and we've solidified which ones are going where, and I'll tell you the reason why. So our smoke tank is going on, let's see here. Smoke tank is going on this side. Fuel tank is going on that side. Reason is when the plane's flipped over, our vent line for a taxi tank is going to be plugged in probably in this area right there. So that's why we've done what we've done. And I've marked the tanks out just so we're clear. But yeah, so we've got the tanks drilled out for our bung. Now this is the stock bung fitting with the stock vent fitting because this is for the smoke tank. For the fuel tank, we've gone with a DreamWorks high flow setup. So it comes as a kit with a high flow pickup, high flow vent, high flow bung fitting. So that's all one kit, and that's going in the fuel side because obviously we've got a fair bit of fuel at the beginning of the startup going through this. Once this tank's empty, it's fine, doesn't matter. So, but yeah, we've gone with a high flow setup just to keep everything consistent. So we're using 8mm Festo everywhere for the fuel system. So now with that all done, we are going to get our fuel fittings installed first, and then we will get our plates installed. Now with the fuel fittings, the DreamWorks ones come with holes pre-done, and there's a little ridge there as well, which helps capture the glue. So there's really not much to do on that side. I do take a Dremel and I roughen up the area around the hole. So we'll do that on that. The vent fittings, I take a Dremel, roughen up around the hole. Now on the stock setup, it's just a smooth setup here. So I'll take my Dremel and I'll add some texture to the silver aluminum fitting before we glue it in place. The tanks are all done. All of our fittings are installed. Our plate covers there for our angles are installed. And what we use to glue all of this is West Systems 610. Good stuff. I like it. It's nice because it comes in a big tube, so there's lots in that tube. With this stuff done, oh, and we also got our main tank. We got our back bracket installed. I had to add a little spacer on there because we cut a lot of it off when we took that piece off the previous tank. Have the fuselage sitting kind of level right now and have the profile equal on each side of the tank, and then stuff some of our exercise balls in the front there just to keep it spaced and set up properly. So we'll leave all that stuff now and back to our back end. So this is all glued, all good, all cured. This is what we did yesterday. It's nice and solid now. Took our tape off, and we can now work on mounting our servo. So what we'll do for that is we're going to get our linkage set up first, and that will determine our gluing position of the actual servo itself. All right, so we've got our servo plate and everything installed from the inside the fuselage. It's just coming out through the opening here, and then we've got it hooked up to our tail hook. So what we do now is we get this tail hook installed, taped in place, and then we glue our servo in place. So the linkage length for the locked position or up position is all fixed, set, and ready to go. All right, so we've got our tail section supported, our tail hook taped and supported in place, fully retracted. And we've got our servo glued in place. So tried to do everything at a nice angle so the servo arm would operate well, the linkage and everything would work out well. And what I do is I put some West Systems on the back of that plate, get it stuck in place, use a bit of CA to hold it in place, and now it's going to cure overnight. So as I've talked about during this installation of the tail hook, we've got it in the locked position in the tail hook up position. So what that's going to do is it's going to take all the pressure off the servo arm and everything is on the linkage. So we're done that. Tanks are done. We're going to let this stuff cure overnight and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so next day, guys, and we have our tanks kind of roughly just placed in here. Now you can see our interference and non-interference points. So main tank is slid in place, that's fixed. We still have to figure out our front attachments, but what I'm looking at here is our interference between the saddle tanks and the main tanks. You can see there, we've got a nice gap between the two tanks. That's exactly what we're looking for. So the only interference we have now is you got to remember this plane's upside down, so that is the top part of the tank. So we have the top part of the tank hitting the fuselage, preventing that tank from sliding all the way down. That one's not as bad, but same thing. So we want to get rid of, at a bare minimum, the excess material right here. The rest of it doesn't matter. We can keep the rest of it. We're going to round it off a little bit, make it a little bit prettier, but we don't need to sand these areas down and make them flush with the tanks. That's not necessary. It's the interference point, which is that part. So I'm going to work on that next and get this shaped to fit. All right, guys, so we got our tanks all sanded down and installed just temporarily. We've got the side pieces bolted in place. Spacing wise, we're good, very happy with that. That turned out much better than I was expecting. So we're gonna work on the main tank front attachment. So here's what I'm thinking. Same kind of situation as we have here. So we've got a base plate with a blind nut that's gonna be glued into the fuselage. And then we'll have a corner piece that's wrapped around the corner for as much surface contact as possible. So probably like that much right there. And it'll be like a tab that's built into this corner. And then our piece that's glued to the fuselage is going to be something like that. So first thing we have to do is take some cardboard and we're just going to make some templates here to be the exact shape that we're looking for. All right, so this will give you an idea of what I was talking about. So this part's going to be mounted to the tank. That part's going to be mounted to the fuselage. And we will probably kind of skew that towards the top. So I'm just kind of getting these things lined up. I don't want this to be super tight to the tank. I want to have a little bit of wiggle room there. So we'll probably run it off like that and up at the front. So that means that when I go to drill these holes, I'm going to be something like that right there. There we go. So now what I will do is we can drill our hole that our fastening screw is going to go through, and that'll give our blind nut the perfect spot and positioning. All right, so we got our pieces all done up here and they are ready to be glued in place. So our blind nut or screw or whatever comes through the bottom a little bit, which is fine. We're going to build this up with quite a bit of epoxy, so that'll be a space for that, no problem. But I've marked out the fuselage here just so we can do a little bit of sanding in this area. And then I've also put a couple little marks on the tank. And the reason for that is when we glue this in, we're also going to glue it to the tank. So we want to do a little bit of sanding on the tank as well and get that thing ready. So I'm going to pull this tank out one more time. We're going to take the saddle tanks out because they don't need to be there anymore. And then we were going to get these pieces glued to the fuselage and glued to the tank all at the same time. All right, so while we had some epoxy mixed up, we did a little bit of touch-up gluing on our tanks. I don't know if they're going to leak, but there's a couple dry spots, so I just touched the edges up a little bit. and we've got everything glued in place. So you can see there we've got our 2 tabs installed. We did all the gluing here at one time, so we're going to leave that again to sit overnight. And then we will have some final gluing on this tank as well too. This is definitely probably one of the most time-consuming portions of this project so far, because we have so much gluing to do, so many steps to accomplish. I mean, we've been gluing things now. This will be 2 nights in a row, and we're going to be a third because tomorrow when this is set, we're going to pull the tank off. We're going to make sure our bottom side of this, these tabs are glued well. Our back tab here, the area underneath that we don't have good access to, we're going to glue that. So there's just a lot of final little touch-ups to do there. And but things are progressing nicely. Final steps for these tanks are near. Now I haven't played around with our tail hook system yet, but we are all glued in place and we should be good. So let's slide this tail section backwards and see how things work out. All right, so we'll pull our tape off here, and I'm just going to see if I can make this operate. So it's locked right in place. Now if I use the servo arm, beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to tip this up like that. So it's unlocked. I moved the servo arm a little bit to unlock it, and now works exactly like I was hoping for. So that is perfect. We're going to have lots of play there to be able to adjust it. And our full locked position, I was able to, do it quite quickly, and she's fully locked in place. All right, once again, it is the next evening and we are removing our main tank. Now, one of the things I didn't talk about is before I glued this in place, I made sure I put a little bit of lubricant on our screws. And that, of course, is to prevent the high sol from sticking to the screws. So now they come out with ease, because when you put the high sol on there and squish those guys down, the high sol kind of oozed all out. And that's why we were able to tool it around the perimeter, but because of the lubricant, screws come out very easy. Now I'm hoping we didn't get any of that flowed onto the tank itself. That would be not so good. So let's see what happens here. Oh, we got a little bit of interference. Oh, yeah. So we got a little bit of glue that went on the bottom pieces, so we're gonna have to take a flat blade screwdriver like trusty, stick it in between there and pop those guys off. Hopefully they come off. All right, so perfect tool for this, trusty bent screwdriver. We stuck them underneath there and popped them loose, and with a bit of force, they came loose. So with any luck, our tank, there we go, perfect, all right. I was worried that we would not be able to get it out. So we got a little bit that stuck to the fabric here on the tank, which is fine. So we'll just get that fixed up. Yeah, so that's pretty much where it's stuck. We just got a little bit on the sides there, no big deal at all. All right, so now before we do any gluing on our tanks, we're going to make sure that they, number 1, don't leak. Number 2, we're happy with our bung setups and everything, and we do have to set up our pickups on the 2 saddle tanks. The tank from CM Jets is going to be done already, but we're going to take that out, rinse the tank out, and then we're going to get these all pressurized and confirm that we're happy with them. All right, so we'll do the inside of the CM Jets tank first. They're always done really well in the CM Jets tank, so we've got nice, huge pickups, very heavy duty. We've got massive size Tygon. We've got a big brass tube in the middle, and they've got little ridges all the way around to provide support for the tube. So perfect setup here, all tie wired, safety wired, that's awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some rubbing alcohol inside the tank. These have some dust on them as well too. So we're going to put rubbing alcohol in the tank, swish it around, dump it out, put some more rubbing alcohol in the tank, put the bung fittings in, or the pickup fittings in to get rid of the dust off here, then dump it out, and then the tank's going to be good. So we'll do that with this one first, then we'll get the pickups set up on the other ones. All right, so main tank's all rinsed, our pickups are all rinsed, and what I use to do this is isopropyl alcohol. the 99% stuff, and this works great. So I used half the bottle to rinse the tank out, put the bungs in, half the bottle again, dumped it all out. I take my compressor, blow it in there. Inside of the tank is completely dry now. We've got our pickups we can install, and this tank's ready to pressurize. So one of the things, I would say it's a key thing when you're doing these tanks, is you want to lubricate that O-ring right there on the cap. So we're ready to install this. So I'm going to take a little bit of silicone oil here, and we just put a little bit on that O-ring. That just ensures that everything gets sealed up nicely. So we'll install that. You don't want to use Loctite on the threads. That is a huge no-no. So we get that installed hand tight. Then we'll take a pair of channel lock pliers and we just give it a little hi-ya. Not much, just a little snug. So now it's, I don't even know, that's like 1 minute of turn after it's tight with your hands. And we'll do the same thing on this other one. All right, so we're ready to do our other fuel tank. This is the fuel side. So we've got a fresh bung, a pickup, our line. So we're gonna just set that aside. And first thing we're gonna do is rinse out this tank. We don't need to rinse the clunk line off and everything because it is all fresh and new. So this one's a bit of a challenge because it's small, but we're gonna dump about half the bottle in there. And then we will rinse it out twice. And the nice thing about the rubbing alcohol is you can just dump it in your garbage can and it will evaporate without issue. So just give it a shake. And often you can look in there, can't show you guys, but you can look in there, you can look in the rubbing alcohol itself and you can see all the dust and floaties that it's picking up. So that's why we do this. All right, another little tip here for you guys on these this tank setup. So this DreamWorks clunk setup comes with Virilison tubing. So the Virilison tubing is a little bit stiff. It's not quite like Festo tubing. It's kind of in between Tygon and Festo. So it's pretty stiff. So what I want to do is I want to have this naturally angled towards the bottom of the tank, which is going to be this side here. So here's a trick for you. So what I do is I take my my fuel bung, and I'm going to get this installed. No lubricant on the O-ring, so it's a little bit stiff right now. Okay, so that's installed. Now we want to mark the bottom of the bung fitting so we know which way to install this tubing so it naturally angles towards the bottom. So we're going to go like this. And now I have sized this tubing so that when it is straight, it is just going to be getting close to the back of the tank. So I'm naturally going to have that angle installed towards the bottom of the tank, but we're going to straighten this out a little bit with some heat, but now we know which way naturally points towards the bottom. Okay, so what I'll do is take this tube, put a little bit of saliva on it, and we're going to get it installed like this. Perfect, so it's angling towards the bottom. Then we'll take our clunk, same thing. Want that to be installed all the way because that's what we sized it based on, like that. And now I'll take my heat gun, warm this guy up a little bit, and just kind of straighten it out so it's sitting sort of like that. All right, so working on the smoke tank here, we've got our bung already done. Now when I was gluing this in, I got this all done already, but the way you install the nipples is you put a little bit of red Loctite on there, thread those in, and the red Loctite takes care of all the sealing of the nipples. Now one of the things about this style of cap is you also don't have any access to do any safety wiring. So what you do is you take a piece of fuel tubing, in this case it's the Sullivan gold tubing, and we put that over top of the pickup tubing here, and that's going to make sure it just gives a little bit of compression around that nipple. So now when we install this, our little extra piece of tubing is acting like a clamp. And then this side we will safety wire. All right, so this is how we pressurize our tanks. You can submerge the tanks, but in a case like this, we can leave them overnight and confirm that they're still holding pressure tomorrow. So we've got 2 pieces of Tygon installed here, and they're clamped off, or they're heated and squished. This side here will blow in with our mouth, and we will clamp this guy off with a pair of pinchers. There we go. So we'll just make sure that there's no air coming out of the tube. Those guys are good. We're pressurized, so we'll leave that for 2 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours. And if we pull these pinchers off later and they're still holding pressure, then we're good. All right, 12 hours later, just released the main tank. We had pressure in it. Let's release the other ones. Usually you got to give this a squish because it sticks. Oh, there we go. We got pressure in that one, and a little bit of rubbing alcohol coming out, and pressure in that one. So all the tanks are good. They all held pressure overnight, and that is perfect. So those are ready to go in that thing over there. And if you guys didn't know, we've got a podcast. I do a podcast with my friend Anthony. It is the RC Air Experience. It's a completely separate channel on YouTube. And we've got guests within the RC industry that we've interviewed. We've coming up on our 1-year anniversary. So if you're not familiar with it, there is a link down below to the RC Air Experience. I encourage you to check it out. We have done a whole bunch of fun interviews. We do have more fun interviews coming up. So check it out at the RC Air Experience here on YouTube. And that, my friends, wraps up video number 3 in the series of the Skymaster F-4 large Phantom aircraft assembly. We're making some wicked progress on this plane. Next video, we are going to start moving into the main part of the fuselage, getting these things joined, so it's going to be a great episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to our channel supporters as well, too, that are channel members. You guys are awesome. If you're interested in becoming a channel member or checking out what it is, there's a link down below, some information down below to channel membership in the video description. Channel members get to see our videos early. So when we upload a video, often it's on YouTube 1 to 2 weeks early. We usually have like 2 to 4 videos already uploaded to YouTube. Channel members get to see those videos before everybody else does. So that's the huge perk of being a channel member. It is a paid thing, but that money does come to the lighter side of RC. So thank you, channel members. Thanks, guys, so much for watching my videos. Appreciate it. That's pretty much it. So we'll see you in the next video.